Okay, so let's jump into Indian beverages.
Sounds good to me.
You send over some fascinating documents about Associated Alcohols and Breweries Limited,
AABL.
AABL, right?
Yeah.
We've got their recent press release and earnings presentation and even some potential investor questions.
It's true. We have all those things, and it's really interesting when you look at all of them together, you get a really interesting view of this company.
It's like we're getting a sneak peek behind the curtain.
Yeah, you could definitely say that.
So our mission is to figure out what all of this means for you, our listener. Is this a company worth watching? Are they on to something big?
Let's find out.
Let's find out.
Okay.
So maybe we should start with the basics. Who is AABL?
Well, they've got the largest integrated manufacturing facility at a single location in India,
Oh, wow.
and that's really key. Gives them a bunch of advantages in terms of efficiency, cost savings, and just control over their whole process.
It makes sense because then you don't have to deal with, transporting stuff between different facilities. And it looks like they're not just making their own brands, they're also working with some big names in the industry.
Absolutely. We're talking big names like Diageo and Imbrew.
Wow.
Plus, they've gotten into the ethanol business as well. They're really covering a lot of ground.
Yeah, they are. And their financials, they're showing some serious growth numbers in their investor presentation. A 14% compound annual growth rate in revenue over the last 10 years,
Right.
15% in EBITDA, and 24% in profit.
Yeah, those are some serious numbers. And they're not just boasting about it. Their numbers seem to actually back it up.
Yeah, I was going to say that's impressive.
Yeah, it suggests that they've been making some smart decisions strategically.
A 24% profit growth is definitely something to take note of, especially in today's environment.
Absolutely.
But let's move on to some of the specifics. Their press release mentions a new appointment, right?
They do, yes.
Yeah.
They've appointed a new company secretary and compliance officer, Mr. Abhinav Mathur, and he's got a really impressive resume.
He does. He's worked with the Gokul Group, Torrent Power Limited, Copran Limited.
Exactly. So you can tell that they're taking this role very seriously.
That definitely sounds like they're serious about corporate governance. Bringing in somebody with his background is probably a good sign for potential investors, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, it shows that they're focusing on transparency and doing things by the book,
Right.
which can be reassuring for stakeholders.
Okay, now let's talk about their recent financial performance. Green prices have been a concern lately, but ABL seems to be doing okay.
Yeah, what's fascinating is despite those, issues, their Q3 and 9-month financials for this fiscal year are really strong.
Wow, so what are the numbers looking like?
Okay, so revenue jumped 71% year over year. EBITDA is up 94%, and profit after tax increased a whopping 107%.
Wow, 107% increase in profit after tax. That's incredible.
It is.
Do you think that their focus on operational efficiency and cost management, which they highlight in their investor presentation, played a role in this?
Oh, for sure. Managing costs is always important, but it's especially crucial when you're dealing with things like, rising grain prices.
Right, right.
And it seems like the steps that they've been taking have been working.
Okay, I'm really interested to hear more about their strategy.
Yeah.
What's their secret sauce?
Well, their investor presentation outlines a few key areas,
Okay.
and I think product diversification is a good place to start.
Okay, what do they have?
They have a wide range of products at all different price points, everything from economy to premium, and they're actively expanding their portfolio.
So they're not just playing it safe with what's already working, they're looking at some new avenues?
Exactly.
Okay, but it seems like they're really emphasizing premiumization. Am I right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Premium products mean higher margins.
Right, of course.
And, they highlight a really interesting case study in their presentation, their entry into the Kerala market with a new white brandy.
Oh, that's interesting. Tell me more about this new white brandy.
It's called Lamount.
Lamount.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they saw incredible growth and market share in a very short period of time.
Wow. So they're willing to, try new things.
Yes.
And tailor their approach to different markets.
It's a good sign.
Yeah, it is. What about geographic expansion? It sounds like they're not content with just staying where they are.
Yeah, you're picking up on something. Their investor presentation specifically mentions targeting new areas like Maharashtra, Goa, and West Bengal.
Wow.
They want to be everywhere.
A pan-India presence.
Exactly.
Now, speaking of the Indian alcohol market, why is that market booming? What's going on?
Well, AABL actually highlights a few key trends in their presentation.
Okay.
First, India has a huge and increasingly wealthy young population, and they're really driving the demand for alcoholic beverages.
It's a classic growth story, right? A young population, rising incomes. That's a recipe for a lot of spending, especially on premium alcohol.
And here's where it gets even more interesting. Despite this growth, India's per capita alcohol consumption is still pretty low compared to other countries.
Oh, so there's a lot of untapped potential.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is good news for companies like AABL.
So AABL is not just, riding the wave. They're actually trying to shape the future of the industry.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. They're not just passive participants here.
Right.
They're making moves to capitalize on these trends and trying to establish themselves as a leader in this evolving market.
Let's dig into how they're shaping the industry, especially with their push toward premiumization. It's a strategy that a lot of companies are adopting, but AABL seems to be taking a very deliberate approach.
Yeah, they're not just, slapping a higher price tag on existing products. They're developing entirely new premium brands.
So like what?
Okay, well, they've launched Nicobar Gin last year
Okay.
and Hillfort Whiskey just recently.
Interesting.
And it looks like they're not stopping there. They're even planning a premium ready-to-drink product.
Really?
And they're considering venturing into the tequila market.
Wow, that's a lot.
It is ambitious.
But, their success with Lamount and Kerala suggests they're doing something right.
Yeah, it seems like they understand how to tailor their premium products to different markets.
Okay, let's switch gears for a minute and talk about their B2B side. They're manufacturing for companies like Diageo and Inbrew. How does that fit into the overall picture?
Right, that's actually a really crucial element of their strategy. It provides a nice steady stream of revenue while they're building up their own brands.
So it's like a safety net while they're making these bold moves in the premium market.
Yeah, you could say that. And, having those long-term relationships with those big companies is a good sign.
Yeah, it speaks volumes about their reliability and reputation.
Absolutely signifies trust and dependability, which are essential in this business.
Now let's talk about their financials again. AABL seems really proud of its financial strength, especially its low debt levels.
And they have every right to be proud. Their net debt-to-equity ratio is only 0.04,
Wow.
which is way lower than most of their peers.
So they're in a good spot to fund their expansion without, taking on crazy risks.
Exactly.
What about their interest coverage ratio?
Oh, it's a healthy 20.7, which again is way above the industry average.
Okay, so they can handle their debt, no problem.
It seems that way.
That's reassuring, especially as they're, taking on these big growth initiatives. It seems like their financial stability is a solid base for whatever they decide to do next. What other advantages does AABL highlight in their presentation?
Well, they emphasize their experience. They've been in the industry for over 4 decades.
Wow.
And that kind of expertise is really valuable in this business.
Yeah.
It translates to consistent quality operational efficiency, which we've already seen in their numbers.
Right, and we've already talked about their transition toward premiumization,
Right.
which seems like a really smart move.
It is. It's a move that a lot of companies are making, but AABL seems to be doing it right.
Yeah, they're thinking ahead.
They are.
Now, they also mentioned their strategic location as an advantage. Can you expand on that a little?
Sure. So their massive facility in Madhya Pradesh is right in the heart of India,
Okay.
which gives them easy access to raw materials from different regions.
Oh, that makes sense. So they can optimize their supply chain and manage those costs.
Yeah. And we talked about the benefits of having everything at a single location.
Right.
It just keeps things running smoothly. And their partnerships, we've got to mention their relationship with Diageo. They've been partners for over 2 decades, haven't
No,
they?
yeah, that's right. Diageo is a global leader, and, that partnership has probably opened a lot of doors for ABL.
It's like having a stamp of approval from, one of the biggest players in the industry.
Absolutely.
It's a testament to AABL's ability to, cultivate those relationships.
Exactly.
Now, AABL also highlights their fully integrated business model as a key differentiator. What does that actually mean in this case?
So they're involved in literally every step of the process.
Like what?
Sourcing the raw materials, producing ENA, bottling the final product, and even handling distribution.
Wow. So they have a lot of control over, the whole process.
Right. It's a comprehensive approach that gives them greater control over quality, costs, and profits, which are all important.
Right, of course. And they're clearly proud of their successes, especially with that Lamount case study in Kerala. Yeah. It's a great example of their ability to enter new markets, understand what the local consumers want, and develop products that people love.
I mean, they didn't just launch a product. They basically created a whole new category with white brandy.
Yeah,
That's innovation in action.
it is.
And it really seems to have paid off for them, both in terms of revenue and market share. It's a real testament to their strategic thinking.
It is. They're not just following trends, they're creating them.
Now, AABL is obviously aiming for continued growth. What are they doing to achieve that?
Well, their investor presentation highlights a few key areas.
Okay.
First, they're expecting continued growth in their IMFL business,
The IMFL.
Indian-made foreign liquor.
Right.
It's a huge category in India.
Okay. And they're betting on both their own proprietary brands and their licensed brands, right?
Exactly. They're covering all the bases.
And what kind of growth are they projecting?
Okay, so they're forecasting 15 to 18% year-over-year growth for their own IMFL brands,
Okay.
and 12 to 15% for the licensed ones.
That's ambitious.
It is, but given their recent performance, it might not be out of reach.
Yeah, that's true. It's impressive, especially given how competitive the market is. And what about their premium line?
Yeah.
They're putting a lot of emphasis on that, right?
They are, yeah. And they're targeting an even higher growth rate for those products.
Yeah.
10 to 20% year over year.
Wow.
It's where they see the most potential.
It makes sense. As people, get more money, they want those premium experiences.
Exactly, and they're willing to pay for them.
Okay, so they're expecting a lot of growth from their IMFL business. But what about their other segments like E&A and ethanol?
Right, so they're expecting steady progress in that B2B segment,
Okay.
forecasting growth in line with the inflation rate.
So they're not abandoning their roots, they're just diversifying.
Exactly. It provides stability,
Makes sense.
especially as they venture into those new areas.
And their financials look great. As we've said, their balance sheet is incredibly strong.
It really is minimal debt, strong cash flow. It's the kind of financial foundation that allows a company to really, weather any potential storms.
So they're in a strong position to fund their expansion without taking on excessive risk.
Exactly.
That financial strength gives them a lot of flexibility and independence, right? They're not beholden to lenders or investors.
That's a very valuable position to be in, especially in a dynamic market like India.
And one of their key goals is to become a true pan-India player.
Uh-huh.
Right now, they have a very strong presence in Madhya Pradesh.
Their home turf.
Yeah, they control a significant portion of the market there, 20 to 25% in both IMFL and ML products. But they're not content with just that, are they?
No, definitely not. The presentation mentions targeting new regions like Maharashtra, Goa West, Bengal, Puducherry, Assam, Tripura.
Wow, they really are going for it.
Yeah.
So they'll need to adapt their strategy accordingly. Each market is different.
Oh, absolutely.
But, they've had success in Kerala, so it's not like they don't know what they're doing.
Right. They've proven they can enter a new market and figure things out.
But it won't be easy.
No, not at all. Competition is fierce.
So what are their key advantages in this expansion push? What sets them apart?
Well, their infrastructure is a major plus.
How so?
Their 150-acre land bank gives them a lot of room to expand their operations.
So they're thinking long term.
Yeah.
Not just short term.
Right. They're not going to be constrained by physical limitations.
Smart. And their integrated operations, we talked about that before. It gives them an edge in terms of efficiency and cost management.
Exactly. Having everything under one roof really streamlines things.
And their experience in Kerala, they've already proven they can enter a new market, establish a brand presence, and achieve significant growth.
It's a crucial point.
Yeah.
They're not starting from scratch in these new markets.
Right. They've got a playbook.
Exactly. And they're not afraid to try new things.
And remember, they were the first company to create white brandy.
That's right.
That boldness could be a real differentiator for them.
Absolutely. They're not just entering new markets. They're aiming to really shake things up.
Now, how are they funding all of this? They seem to be emphasizing internal accruals as their primary source of funding.
Yeah, it's a bold move, especially for a company with such big plans.
So they're not rushing into debt or seeking outside investors.
No, it seems like they're really committed to sustainable growth.
Yeah.
They're funding this expansion with the profits they're generating.
Which is a good sign about their business model.
Yeah.
Now, they have made some significant investments in recent years, haven't they? Particularly in their ethanol plant and bottling plant expansion.
Yeah, their ethanol plant was a big one. It cost them about Rs 150 crore.
Wow.
But it's a smart move. The Indian government is really pushing for ethanol blending.
Right.
It's a growing market.
And their bottling plant expansion.
Yeah, they've increased their capacity significantly. They're up to 12.4 million cases annually.
Okay, so they're putting their money where their mouth is investing in the infrastructure they need.
They are, and they're doing it all while keeping that debt low.
That's impressive. Now, they did take out a loan to fund that ethanol plant, but it seems like they structured it in a way that, minimizes their risk.
Yeah, they secured the loan under the interest subvention scheme,
Okay.
which basically gives them government support.
That's smart, taking advantage of those government incentives.
Yeah, it's a win-win.
And their strong cash flows should allow them to meet those debt repayments without any issues.
Yeah, their repayment schedule is manageable.
It seems like a well-managed company,
It does.
making those strategic decisions that support both their short-term and long-term goals. Now, ABL also highlights their ability to leverage the fungibility of raw materials and finished products. What does that actually mean?
So they're flexible.
Okay,
They can use a variety of grains for their alcohol production.
so they're not limited to just one type of grain, which is good when prices fluctuate.
Exactly. It gives them more control over their input costs.
It's like having a diversified portfolio of ingredients.
Yeah, you can say that.
Okay, let's shift our focus to the broader industry for a minute. What are the key growth catalysts driving the Indian alcohol market? What's fueling this boom?
Okay, well, we've already touched on a few of them. India has a large and young population,
Right.
and they are the main drivers of demand.
Over 88% of individuals under 25 in India either buy or consume alcoholic beverages. That's a massive market.
It is, and it's only getting bigger.
That's a lot of potential customers.
Yeah, it's a great sign for the industry.
And it's not just about, the number of people. It's also about how they're drinking.
Right. They're more experimental.
Open to trying new things.
Exactly.
It's exciting.
It is.
It shows a market that's evolving.
Yeah, moving beyond traditional preferences and trying new flavors and experiences.
And let's not forget about disposable income.
Right. As people have more money, they can spend more on things like alcohol.
It's a classic economic driver, and it's definitely fueling that premiumization trend.
For sure.
And despite all this growth, India's per capita alcohol consumption is still relatively low compared to other countries.
Yeah. India ranks 101st globally with a per capita consumption of 11.8 liters,
Wow.
which is significantly lower than a lot of developed countries.
So there's still a lot of room for growth.
A lot of room.
That's really exciting for companies like ABL. Okay, but are there any specific trends within these broader shifts that are worth pointing out?
Yes, definitely. So younger people in India are not just drinking more, they're drinking differently.
Okay. How so?
Well, they're more open to experimenting with different types of alcohol.
Okay.
They're more brand conscious, and they're really influenced by global trends.
So it's not just about volume anymore, it's about variety and sophistication.
You got it.
Okay, and alongside this generational shift, we're also seeing a big increase in disposable income.
Absolutely. India's middle class is growing rapidly, and their purchasing power is increasing.
And that's fueling the demand for those premium products and experiences.
Exactly, and that's good news for companies like AABL.
Okay, and then there's urbanization, another mega trend.
Right, as more people move to cities, they have more access to alcohol.
And they're exposed to a wider variety of products.
Exactly. It creates a more dynamic and competitive market.
Okay, let's talk about premiumization in more detail. This trend is happening across the board in India. From whiskey to gin to vodka, consumers are becoming more discerning, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely. They're
Okay.
willing to pay more for higher quality products,
Yeah.
unique flavors, craftsmanship.
And they're not just looking for, the product itself.
Right, it's about the experience.
And this willingness to experiment is not limited to domestic brands. Indian consumers are increasingly open to trying imported brands.
Yeah, it's a globalized market.
So let's look at some data about the rise of premiumization, specifically in the Indian whiskey market. Whiskey is king in India, right?
It is.
Okay, so what does the data tell us?
Okay, so back in 2015, premium whiskey only made up about 7% of total whiskey sales in terms of volume.
Okay.
But by 2023, that share had jumped to 12%, and it's projected to reach 16% by 2028.
So the premium whiskey market is growing much faster than the overall whiskey market.
Exactly.
Ah,
Consumers are trading up,
okay.
and in terms of value, the premium segment is even more dominant. So in 2015, premium whiskey accounted for 16% of total whiskey sales value.
Okay.
But by 2023, that number had risen to 21%, and it's projected to reach 24% by 2028.
So not only are more people buying premium whiskey, but they're also spending more on it.
Exactly.
This premiumization trend is really something.
It's reshaping the industry.
And it's not just limited to whiskey.
No, we're seeing similar trends in gin, vodka, and rum.
It seems like the message is clear. Premiumization is here to stay.
Absolutely.
But despite this, incredible growth and all this potential, the Indian alcohol industry does face some challenges.
It does.
What are some of the key hurdles that companies like AABL need to overcome?
Well, the regulatory environment is a big one.
How so?
Each state in India has its own laws and regulations about alcohol.
So it's not just about having a great product and a good strategy. You've also got to understand all these different rules.
Exactly.
Okay, and then there are the taxes.
Oh, yeah. High taxes on alcohol can make it really expensive for consumers.
Right. So companies need to find that balance between making a profit and keeping their prices competitive.
For sure.
And then there's the social stigma.
Right. Alcohol consumption is still a sensitive issue in some parts of India.
It's a complex issue.
It is.
And companies need to be respectful of these cultural norms while also promoting their products responsibly.
Absolutely. It's a delicate balance.
And of course, there are health concerns
Right.
associated with excessive alcohol consumption.
It's a valid concern.
And the industry needs to address this.
For sure, promoting responsible drinking habits is crucial.
Yeah. So despite these challenges, the Indian alcohol industry is doing really well.
It is.
It's a dynamic and competitive market.
Very much so.
But what's driving this growth in spite of these challenges?
Okay, well, we've already talked about those favorable demographics.
Right.
You know, the rising incomes and rapid urbanization.
It's a market with a ton of potential.
It is.
And companies like AABL are in a good position to take advantage of that.
They are.
But they need to keep adapting
Absolutely.
to changing consumer preferences, innovate with new products, and build strong brands.
Yeah, complacency is not an option.
Okay, let's shift our focus back to AABL. What are their key competitive advantages? What sets them apart in this crowded market?
Well, their integrated business model is a big one.
Right. We've talked about that it gives them control over every step of the process.
Exactly.
And their long-standing relationship with Diageo.
Right. That partnership has been huge for them.
Okay. And their strategic location in Madhya Pradesh.
Yeah, it gives them easy access to raw materials and puts them close to a large consumer market.
Plus, they've got that strong financial position.
Right. Low debt, strong cash flow, all good things.
It seems like they've got all the pieces in place. But what about their management team? Do they have the experience and vision to lead the company through this next phase of growth?
From what I can tell, they do. Their leadership team has a lot of experience, and they seem to have a clear understanding of where they want to take the company.
Okay, so let's talk about their growth strategy specifically. How are they planning to capitalize on all these opportunities? What are their top priorities?
So their strategy is built around 4 key pillars:
Okay, I'm listening.
premiumization, expansion, innovation, and operational excellence.
So they're not just focusing on one thing.
No, they're taking a multifaceted approach.
Okay, let's break it down.
Yeah.
How are they putting each of those pillars into action?
Okay, so their premiumization strategy is all about developing those high-quality, aspirational brands
Right.
that cater to those consumers who are looking for something special.
Okay.
And they've already launched some successful brands like Nicobar Gin and Hillfort Whiskey.
Right.
And it seems like they're planning even more premium products in the future.
So they're not just dipping their toes in, they're going all in.
Yeah, you could say that.
And they're backing it up with marketing campaigns that really highlight the quality and exclusivity of these offerings.
Exactly.
Now, what about expansion? They've mentioned wanting to move beyond Madhya Pradesh.
They're looking at new markets like Maharashtra, Goa, and West Bengal.
Okay, so large states with a lot of growth potential.
Exactly.
And they're not limiting themselves to India.
Right. They're also thinking about exporting their product.
Ambitious.
Very.
Now, what about innovation?
Okay, so they're focused on developing new products and flavors.
They're experimenting with new ingredients and production techniques.
Right. They're trying to create something unique and appealing.
So they're not just copying what's already out there.
Nope. They're trying to push the boundaries.
It's smart, especially in an industry where consumer tastes are always changing.
Exactly. Yeah, and when it comes to operational excellence, they're all about improving their efficiency, productivity, and quality.
So they're using technology and automation to streamline things.
Exactly. They're not just sticking with the old ways of doing things.
And sustainability.
Yeah, they're implementing initiatives to reduce their environmental impact.
It seems like they're covering all the bases. Their growth strategy is really well-rounded.
It is, and their recent performance seems to back up their approach.
So speaking of performance, let's take a closer look at their financials from the latest quarter Q3 of fiscal year 2025.
Okay, let's do it.
What were some of the key highlights?
Well, their net revenue from operations in Q3 was Rs. $3,270 million,
Okay.
which is a 71% increase from last year.
Wow, a 71% increase. That's huge.
It's driven by a combination of volume growth and strategic price increases.
Okay, so were there any particular segments that performed really well?
Yeah, their IMFL proprietary business, their own brands,
Right.
really stood out. Their volumes grew by 23% year over year.
Wow, that's a big jump. It seems like their focus on premiumization is paying off.
It seems that way.
What about their other segments?
So their IMFL license business,
Yeah.
those are the brands they produce for partners like Diageo,
Right.
also grew Their volumes increased by 8% year over year.
Okay, so not as much as the proprietary segment, but still a healthy growth rate.
Yeah, especially in a market that's already pretty mature.
What about their mill business?
So that segment is holding steady volumes, grew by 8% year over year,
Yeah.
showing that they're maintaining their position in a competitive market.
It's good that they're diversified, not
Yeah.
putting all their eggs in one basket.
Right. And even their merchant E&A business, while seeing a decline in volumes, they made up for it with higher realizations.
So they're being strategic, focusing on profitability rather than just chasing volume.
Exactly.
And what about their newest venture, the ethanol business?
So it's still early days,
Right.
but the results are promising.
Okay, how so?
Well, volumes and revenue are going up significantly quarter over quarter.
It seems like they timed their entry into this market perfectly.
Yeah, they really did.
Okay, so their top-line performance is strong, but are they making money? Are they translating this revenue growth into profits?
Their EBITDA in Q3 was RS $395 million, a 94% increase from last year.
Wow.
And their EBITDA margin expanded by a full percentage point to 12%.
That's a significant improvement.
It is.
What do you think contributed to that?
Well, their focus on operational efficiency and cost management definitely played a role.
Right. They've managed to keep those costs in check even as they've grown their operations.
Exactly. And that's not easy, especially with those rising grain prices we talked about.
Okay, so what about their bottom line, their profit after tax?
So in Q3, their profit after tax was RS $261 million, a 107% increase from last year.
107% increase.
Yeah, it's amazing.
That's huge.
And their PAT margin also expanded by a percentage point to 8%.
It really seems like their strategic decisions and operational improvements are paying off.
They are.
It's great to see a company doing so well. It looks like they're on the right track. But let's step back for a minute and think about their future prospects. What are some of the key opportunities and risks they face going forward?
Okay. Well, when it comes to opportunities, the continued growth of the Indian alcohol market is a big one.
Right. It's a market with a lot of momentum.
Exactly.
And ABL is well positioned to benefit from that.
Their diverse portfolio, their partnerships, their premiumization strategy, it all aligns perfectly with the current market trends.
It seems like they've really anticipated these trends and made the right moves to capitalize on them.
Yeah, and within that broader market growth, the demand for premium alcohol specifically is a huge opportunity.
Right. Consumers are willing to spend more for those higher quality experiences.
Exactly. And AEBL is ready to meet that demand.
And then there's the ethanol opportunity
Right.
with the government's push for ethanol blending that's creating a whole new market.
And ABL's already jumped in.
Smart move.
It is.
Okay, but what about the risks? What are some potential challenges they need to be aware of?
Well, the competitive landscape is a constant challenge.
Yeah.
There are a lot of players in the Indian alcohol market, both domestic and international.
So they can't afford to get complacent.
Definitely not. They
Yeah.
need to keep innovating, investing in marketing, and making sure their prices are competitive.
Right.
And they need to be careful with that complex regulatory environment we talked about.
Right. Each state has its own rules.
Exactly. And it can get really complicated and costly.
It's a challenge they'll need to manage carefully as they expand into new areas.
And then there's the social stigma associated with alcohol.
Right. It's still an issue in some parts of India.
It is, and ABL needs to be sensitive to that as they grow.
It's about promoting responsible drinking habits
Exact.
and being a good corporate citizen.
Absolutely.
And of course, there's always the risk of an economic slowdown.
Right. The Indian economy is doing well now, but things can change.
So they need to be prepared for that.
They do. They need to be adaptable and resilient.
Okay, so it seems like AABL is facing a mix of opportunities and challenges. Do you think they're up to the task?
Overall, I think they have a lot going for them. Their brand portfolio, their business model, their partnerships, their financials, their management team. It's a solid foundation.
Okay, so let's talk about their board of directors for a minute. What role does the board play in guiding the company towards success?
Well, the board is responsible for overseeing the company's strategy, performance, and governance.
Okay.
They provide guidance to the management team.
So they're not just a rubber stamp.
Definitely not.
Yeah.
They're actively involved in making sure the company is on the right track.
So what does AABL's board look like? Do they have the right mix of expertise?
Yeah, it seems that way. They have 7 members, including the managing director, 2 full-time directors, and 4 independent directors.
Okay, so a mix of insiders and outsiders.
Yes, you need both perspectives.
And are they all committed to good corporate governance?
They seem to be. They emphasize transparency, accountability, and fairness.
That's good to hear. Now, do they have any specific committees within the board that focus on particular areas?
Yeah, do they have committees for things like audit compensation and corporate social responsibility?
Okay, so it's a very structured approach to governance.
It is. It shows they're serious about doing things the right way.
Now, behind every good board is a strong leadership team. What can you tell us about AABL's leadership? Do they have what it takes to execute the company's plans?
Yeah, they seem to. It's a group of experienced professionals who really understand the alcohol industry.
Okay, so who are some of the key players on the leadership team?
Well, at the top, you've got Mr. Ansuman. He's the CEO.
Okay, and he's responsible for...
Everything pretty much overseeing all aspects of the business
Yeah.
and driving that growth strategy.
You've got a big job.
He does.
And what about their finances? Who's in charge of that?
So Mr. Tushar Bandari is the CFO.
Okay.
He handles all things financial, accounting, treasury, investor relations.
Okay. And managing the finances of a company like AABL is no small feat.
No, it's not.
Does he have any help?
Yeah, they have Mr. Ankit Agrawal as the group CFO,
Okay. And he's responsible for...
overseeing the financial operations of ABL and its subsidiaries.
Okay, so they've got a strong finance team in place.
They do.
What about manufacturing? That's really the core of their business.
Right. And that's where Mr. Arun Sani comes in. He's the unit head.
Okay, and what does he do?
He manages the day-to-day operations of that massive manufacturing facility.
Making sure everything runs smoothly.
Exactly.
And what about legal and compliance?
So that's Mr. Abhinav Mathur's area. He's the company secretary. He makes sure they're following all the rules and regulations.
Which is crucial in India with all those different state laws.
Absolutely.
And what about their employees?
They have Mr. Rajiv Nima heading up HR.
Okay, so he's responsible for...
All things people-related, recruitment, training, compensation, you name it.
It's a big job, especially for a company that's growing as fast as AABL.
It is.
Okay, now let's talk sales and marketing. That's what drives revenue and builds their brand.
Right, so for sales,
Yeah.
they have Mr. S.R. Dubey. He's the group sales head.
And he's responsible for it.
Growing revenue and expanding into those new markets.
Okay, and what about marketing?
They have Mr. Sanjeev Kumar Tulsian as the head of marketing.
Okay, and he's focused on...
Developing and executing their marketing strategy, building that brand awareness.
So it seems like they've got a really solid leadership team.
They do. They've got expertise in all the right areas.
Okay, so now let's zoom out and consider those broader macroeconomic and industry trends that are shaping the Indian alcohol market.
Okay.
What are some of the key factors driving the industry's growth?
Well, India is a fast-growing economy with a large and young population, a rising middle class, and rapid urbanization.
All good things for the alcohol industry.
Right. These trends are creating a really good environment for growth.
And people have more money to spend, which means more spending on things like alcohol.
Exactly. And changing lifestyles, especially in cities, are leading to more occasions where people drink.
It's a classic growth story, and the alcohol industry is definitely benefiting.
It is.
Now, what about specific industry trends? What are some of the things shaping the market and influencing what consumers want?
Well, we've already talked about premiumization.
Right. Consumers want higher quality products.
Exactly. And along with that, there's a growing demand for low alcohol and non-alcoholic beverages.
Oh, that's interesting. It seems like people want it all.
They do. They want those high-quality premium products, but they also want healthier options.
It makes sense consumers are becoming more health conscious.
They are.
Okay. What other trends are you seeing?
So another big one is the rise of digital platforms for buying and selling alcohol.
Okay, so more people are buying alcohol online.
Exactly, especially younger consumers.
And companies are using social media and other digital channels to reach those consumers.
Right. It's all about meeting the customer where they are.
Okay, so alongside those opportunities, what are some of the challenges the industry is facing?
We've talked about the complex regulatory environment.
Right.
And the high taxes.
And the social stigma.
All of those things are still challenges for the industry.
Companies need to be mindful of all of those factors.
They do if they want to be successful.
And there's always that risk of an economic slowdown.
Right. This is something to be prepared for.
So with all of that in mind, do you think ABL is well equipped to navigate this complex landscape?
You know, I think they are. They've got a good understanding of the market. They've got a solid strategy, and they're adapting to those changing consumer preferences.
They're not standing still.
Definitely not.
Okay, so let's focus on some of AABL's key strengths and how they can use those to achieve their goals. What are some of their biggest advantages?
Well, their integrated business model is a huge plus.
Right. It gives them control over every step of the process.
And their brand portfolio is strong.
They've got some well-known brands that people like.
Yeah, they've invested in building those brands, and it's paying off.
And their partnership with Diageo is a big advantage.
It is. It gives them access to expertise, a global distribution network, and a strong brand portfolio.
It's a smart partnership.
It is.
And their location in Madhya Pradesh is strategic.
Right. It gives them easy access to raw materials and a large consumer market.
And their financials are solid.
Very solid, low debt, strong cash flow, a history of profitability. They're in a good position.
It seems like they've got it all, but what about their management team?
Their management team is experienced and capable. They know the industry, and they have a clear vision for the future.
It sounds like they've got a good team in place.
They do.
Okay, so let's dig into their growth strategy a little more. How are they planning to capitalize on all the opportunities in the Indian alcohol market?
They're focusing on 4 key areas:
Okay, what are they?
premiumization, expansion, innovation, and operational excellence.
And we've already talked about how they're putting those into action.
We have.
Okay, so now let's get specific. What are some potential moves they could make to really solidify their position in the market?
Okay, so let's start with premiumization. They could expand their craft spirits offerings.
Okay.
Well, they could create limited edition versions of their existing brands, maybe aged in special barrels or finished in wine casks.
Oh, that's interesting.
Right, and they could collaborate with mixologists to develop unique cocktails.
So creating a sense of exclusivity.
Exactly.
Okay. And they could also leverage their partnership with Diageo to tap into global trends.
Right.
Maybe introduce an Indian-inspired, ready-to-drink cocktail.
Yeah, that's a great idea, capitalizing on the global interest in those unique flavors.
And they could use Diageo's distribution network to reach new markets.
Exactly.
It's a win-win.
And they could do more with their digital presence.
Okay, like what?
They could host virtual tasting events, create cocktail-making tutorials with their master distiller, build an online community.
So going beyond traditional marketing and really engaging with consumers, and with their focus on operational excellence, they could really push the boundaries of sustainability.
Yeah.
Imagine becoming the first carbon-neutral distillery in India.
That would be huge.
It would really make a statement.
It would.
It seems like AABL has a lot of exciting possibilities ahead of them.
They do.
They're not afraid to be bold and innovative.
And that's what makes them so interesting to follow.
It's been a really fascinating look at AABL and the Indian alcohol market.
Yeah.
It's a company that's worth keeping an eye on.
Absolutely. Yeah, it really is a fascinating question.
Yeah.
You know, how do you balance honoring your heritage with trying new things?
It's a tough one.
It is. But finding that balance is key for long-term success, especially in a market like India.
Okay, so before we wrap up this deep dive, let's take a look at some of the specific data points AABL highlights in their presentation, especially their revenue breakdown.
Okay.
Their investor deck has a nice chart that shows how their revenue is split across different products.
Right.
So let's start with fiscal year 2021. What was the revenue mix back then?
Okay, so in fiscal year 2021, their IMFL proprietary products, those are their own brands, made up about 18% of their total revenue.
Okay.
And their IMFL licensed brands, the ones they produce in partnership with other companies, contributed 23%.
So those two segments combined were a pretty big chunk of their revenue.
Yeah, they were.
What about the rest of their products?
So their IML products, that's made Indian liquor, made up 17% of their revenue. And their merchant E&A business, that's extra neutral alcohol, was 26%.
Okay, so even back then, they were already pretty diversified.
Yeah.
What about their others category? What does that include?
So that category, which was about 16% of their revenue in 2021, includes things like byproducts like that cattle feed we mentioned earlier.
Right. It's a smart way to use what they already have.
It is.
Okay, so let's fast forward to the 9 months ending in December 2024, the most recent data they provided. Were there any big changes in their revenue mix?
Yeah, actually, there are some interesting shifts. IMFL proprietary products have grown to 21% of their revenue.
Okay.
And IMFL licensed brands are now 24%.
So those two segments are becoming even more important.
Exactly.
What about IMML and ENA?
So EMEAL has stayed at 17%, pretty consistent,
Okay.
but merchant ENA has shrunk to 12%.
So maybe that reflects their shift toward those higher margin products like IMFL and ethanol?
Yeah, could be.
And speaking of ethanol, that's a new addition to their portfolio, right?
It is. And in those 9 months ending in December 2024, ethanol was already 10% of their total revenue.
Wow, so it's growing fast.
Yeah, it seems like they made a good decision getting into that market.
And the others category, has that changed much?
Yeah, it's down about 5% now. Maybe they're streamlining their operations and focusing on those core products.
So overall, it's a story of strategic focus and diversification. They're growing those key segments, and they're capitalizing on the ethanol opportunity.
Exactly.
Okay, let's get a little more specific and look at their segment-wise financial performance, starting with their IMFL proprietary business. That's where their premiumization strategy is most evident.
Right.
So let's see how those premium brands are doing. What are the numbers telling us?
Okay, so in Q3, the fiscal year 2025, they sold 469,000 cases of IFL proprietary products,
Okay.
and that brought in Rs. 368 million in revenue.
So that's up from the same quarter last year.
Yet is in Q3 of last year, they sold 382,000 cases and generated Rs. 280 million.
Okay, so both volumes and revenue are up significantly. That's a good sign.
And their realization per case has also gone up, meaning they're getting higher prices for their premium offerings.
So it's working. They're creating value, not just chasing volume.
Exactly.
Now, what about their IMFL licensed business? How did that segment do in Q3?
They sold 616,000 cases of IMFL licensed brands, bringing in RNS 770 million.
Okay.
That's up from 570,000 cases and RNS 684 million in the same quarter last year.
Okay. So still growth, but not as much as the proprietary segment.
Yeah, but it's still good, especially considering the industry is slowing down a bit.
And their realization per case has stayed stable, so they're maintaining their pricing power.
Right.
Okay, so that's a solid performance. Now, what about their IML business? That's a big part of their portfolio.
It is, and it's doing well. In Q3, they sold 1,086,000 cases, generating Rs. 617 million,
Okay.
which is up from 1,005,000 cases and Rs. 503 million last year.
Okay, so steady growth and their realization per case has also gone up a little bit.
Yeah, it looks like they're improving their margins even in a competitive market.
So now let's look at their merchant E&A business, which has seen a decline in volume as they focus on those higher margin products.
Right.
So what did the numbers look like?
Okay, so for the 9 months ending in December 2024, they sold 15 million liters of E&A, generating Rs. 983 million,
Okay.
which is down from 19 million liters and Rs. 1,137 million last year.
So a pretty big drop in volume, but their realization per liter hasn't changed much, so they're still getting decent prices.
Right, they're managing the decline strategically.
And their ethanol business is really picking up the slack.
Yeah, and in Q3, they sold 10 million liters of ethanol, generating Rs. 719 million.
That's a huge jump from the previous quarter.
It is. Their ethanol business is growing fast.
Okay, so we've looked at their performance by segment. Now let's look at their overall financials, starting with their quarterly income statement for Q3 of fiscal year 2025.
Okay.
What are the main takeaways?
Their gross revenue for the quarter was Rs. 3,343 million, a 73% increase from last year.
Wow, 73%. That's amazing.
It is.
And what about their net revenue after taking out excise duty?
So their net revenue from operations was Rs. 3,270 million, still a 71% increase.
So even after excise duty, their top line growth is really strong.
Yeah, it is.
Now, what about their expenses? Have they been able to control costs as they've grown?
So their total operating expenses went up by 69% to Rs. 2,875 million.
Okay.
That's because of the costs of expanding their operations, but it's still lower than their revenue growth.
So their operating leverage is working for them.
Exactly.
What about their EBITDA?
Their EBITDA was Rs. 395 million, a 94% increase year over year, and their EBITDA margin expanded to 12%.
That's a significant improvement in profitability. It seems like they're becoming more efficient as they grow.
It does.
Now, what about other income? Do they have any significant income streams outside of their main operations?
So their other income actually went down by 39% to Rs. 11 million.
Okay.
That's because of lower interest rates on their cash balances. But it's a small decrease and doesn't really affect their overall profitability.
And their depreciation expenses?
Those went up by 24% to Rs. 42 million. That's because they've added new assets like their ethanol plant.
Right.
It's the cost of investing in growth.
And interest expenses?
Those went up too by 30% to Rs. 13 million because of the debt they took on for that ethanol plant.
Okay, but those increases are pretty small compared to their overall profitability.
Yeah.
So let's look at their profit before tax.
Their profit before tax jumped by 98% to Rs. 351 million.
Okay. And their tax expenses?
Those went up by 73% to Rs. 90 million, which makes sense because their profits are higher.
Okay, so what's the bottom line, their profit after tax?
That came in at Rs. 261 million, a 107% increase from last year.
Wow, 107%. That's incredible.
Yeah, and their PT margin expanded to 8%.
It really seems like they're doing everything right.
It does.
Okay, so now let's look at their 9-month income statement for the period ending in December 2024. This will give us a bigger picture view.
Okay.
What are the key numbers there?
So their gross revenue for for the 9 months was Rs 8,481 million, up 63% from last year.
Okay, so they're still growing at a really good rate.
Yeah, and their net revenue from operations was Rs 8,394 million, up 61%.
Okay, so that top line growth is consistent.
It is.
What about their operating expenses for those 9 months?
Those went up by 61% to Rs 7,408 million, but their EBITDA still went up by 59% to Rs 926 million.
So that operating leverage is still working for them.
Yeah, their revenue is growing faster than their expenses.
What about their other income for the 9 months?
That went down by 38% to Rs 39 million, again, because of those lower interest rates, but it doesn't really affect the big picture.
And their depreciation and interest expenses?
Depreciation went up by 23% to Rs 124 million, and interest expenses more than doubled to Rs 43 million because of that ethanol plant loan.
Okay, so both of those are up, but it's not surprising given their investments.
Right.
So the key is whether their earnings are growing faster.
And it looks like their profit before tax for the 9 months increased by 52% to Rs 798 million.
Okay, and what about taxes?
Their tax expenses went up by 47% to Rs 207 million, which makes sense because their profits are up. So their profit after tax for the 9 months was Rs 591 million, a 54% increase.
54% over 9 months. That's amazing.
Yeah, it shows the strategy is working.
And their PAT margins stayed at 7%, so they're staying profitable as they grow.
Exactly. It's a good sign.
So overall, their financial performance looks really good, but numbers only tell part of the story. What's your overall take on AABL? Do you think they can achieve their goals?
You know, from what we've seen today, I think they're in a really good position.
Yeah.
They've got a great foundation, they're making smart moves, and they've got a talented team.
It's been a fascinating deep dive. We've learned a lot about AABL and the Indian alcohol market.
Yeah, it has.
It's a company worth following.
Absolutely.
So as we wrap up, I want to leave our listeners with something to think about. In a world where consumer tastes are always changing, how can companies like AABL balance tradition and innovation?
It's a great question.
It's a challenge that a lot of companies face, and it'll be interesting to see how AABL navigates it.
As well.
So to our listeners, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into AABL. We hope you enjoyed it.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
Cheers.